Hello.
We are good to go when ready.
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the January 18th special meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Perez and seconded by, was it Franzen? Is that right? Okay. All right. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Director Benkin, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda will be our public forum. And I will go ahead and read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And for our members of the public, if you wish to speak, you may go ahead and raise your hand, and we will go in order and give people permission to speak. So, are there any members of the public who would like the opportunity to speak? Stephanie Hamilton, you have been given permission to speak. Except you are on mute.
Stephanie Hamilton, 2603 Kingston Drive. And my question, I think, remains, I feel like all the communication from the district is this move to 100% face-to-face with the option for remote, but it's not clear to me what happens if the metrics say we need to go back into some kind of hybrid. Is that still an option? Are we committing to 100%? I do feel like this is a bit premature with vaccines around the corner. And I also feel it's premature that the state has not passed any legislation requiring this. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is there anyone else who is wishing to speak? Okay, I do not see any hands raised. I will give just another second here just in case. Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and close our public forum. And moving on to our action item, return to 100% face-to-face instruction for grades 6 through 12. And I will entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the transition to 100% face-to-face learning for grades 6 through 12, starting on February 1st.
Second.
Okay, moved by Benkin, seconded by Franzen. Discussion?
Where are we on the metrics for today? Do we have the
I was just going to see if Superintendent Reisner and Dr. Arnold would like to give us an update on the metrics.
You bet. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, here we go with our metrics update.
This first slide shows the COVID positives and quarantines in our schools. Today, we have 9 students positive for COVID-19 and 31 quarantining due to being identified as close contacts. Additionally, there are 2 staff positive for COVID-19, 7 quarantining due to close contacts, and 2 pending test results. The graphs show the positives and quarantines since October. The left graph shows positives, the right quarantines. And as a reminder, the students are in orange and the staff are in gray. The chart shows the number of each category per day reporting as a positive or quarantine. Our next slide shows our Story County metrics. The Story County 14-day average new daily case rate is 36.5. And as you can see from the graph on the left below, our case count has hovered in the mid to upper 30s for the past 10 days. It is possible we have plateaued at this point following holiday travel. It's also possible that we will see an increase in case rate as ISU students return to Ames. There are 5,000 students, including on and off campus, that will be tested prior to the beginning of the ISU spring semester. And then the right graph shows our cumulative case rate since school began and the impact of that ISU testing that happened at the beginning of the school year, right around September 1st. The next slide shows our school metrics. As of today, our 5-day student absence rates are as follows. The high school at 2.68%, middle school at 1.93%, and PK through 5 combined at 1.93%. This keeps us in the green risk band for all levels. The 5-day staff absence rate for the high school is 6.27%, middle school 5.17%, and elementary 4.15%. High school and middle school are in the lower end of the yellow risk band, while elementary remains in the green risk band. And a majority of the staff absences are not COVID related, as you can see from our previous slide. The charts below show the students on the left and the staff on the right for the past month, and just looking at the trends on those. And then the final slide, which got a little preview there, is our, while not specifically metrics related, is an update for our ACSD COVID-19 vaccination plan. This is, of course, information as of today and is subject to change. The projected start date for phase 1B in Iowa is February 1st. With that said, it does not confirm our ability to start vaccinations on February 1st, but instead it will depend on the distribution and allocation that we receive in scheduling from Story County Public Health. The ACSD COVID-19 vaccine clinics will be held at the district office and will be for ACSD staff, bus drivers, food service, student teachers, coaches, and substitute teachers. Priority groups for distribution have been determined due to the projected limitations on the amount of vaccine we will be allocated each week. Staff are not required to get the vaccine, but they are required to register if they do want to get the vaccine, and that registration period ends on this Thursday. Scheduled dates and times for the clinics will again depend on how many doses we are allocated each week, and appointments will be required and available by priority group. And finally, we don't know which vaccine manufacturer we're going to receive, Pfizer or Moderna. Both require a second dose, either 21 or 28 days after the first dose, and some protection from the vaccine starts 7 days after the first dose. However, immunity reaches its peak of about 95% approximately 2 weeks after the second dose. And that ends my update.
Dr. Arnold, could you clarify, did I hear you say that staff are not required to get the vaccine?
Correct.
Why are they not required to get the vaccine?
Superintendent Reisner?
That is not something that that is not something the Department of Education or the Department of Health has required has required for teachers in terms of school districts overall. That would be something, if we wanted to require it, we would need to explore with legal counsel.
So I know our students are required to be vaccinated. Are our teachers not required to be vaccinated?
I can pull up the policy on that and give you, I don't want to talk without the policy in front of me. There are vaccines that teachers are required to have, but there are vaccines that they can opt out of just as students can. That I know where you're going next, except for when you're in a pandemic situation or something similar, when they would not be able to be in the building or work if they didn't have the vaccination. I definitely don't want to go deep into this without having the policy in front of me.
And
Sorry.
that's fine. I don't want you to. I guess I just needed to understand because that caught me by surprise. Are students also not going to be required to be vaccinated?
At this point, nobody's required.
I guess part of what I'm thinking is, I think we've been hearing a lot from our community about, holding off until the vaccines come, and when the vaccines come and vaccines are going to save us. What you're really saying is we could move forward with nobody getting any vaccines.
Correct.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you.
I have Dr. Arnold, and it may be Superintendent Reisner. With the clinics being at the district office, will there be substitute teachers that are provided to support staff as they try to navigate getting that taken care of?
It is after hours, so we begin at 2:30, I believe. It's 2:30 to 6:30 or something like that.
Okay, outside school hours.
Yes.
Okay, and then Dr. Arnold, I may have missed it, or maybe you didn't say in your report. You gave us the 14-day case rate. Did you mention the 7-day case rate?
That isn't a number we've shared. I can look that up for you, but that isn't something that's normally within our metrics, just because of volatility of the numbers.
Okay, I was just writing really fast at that part of the report, so I didn't know if I'd missed it. Thank you.
Sure.
Do you know what our 7-day and our 14-day positivity rate is? I just looked up our 14-day, but I don't know what our 7-day is.
I am looking it up for you right now. So, of course, my computer chooses to reload at this moment. Apologies for technological difficulties.
If we want to go on to the next question, and then when you get that, feel free to jump in.
I can jump in really quick. I got it finally. Sorry.
Okay.
Our 14-day positivity is 9.5%, and our 7-day positivity is 6.9%. And again, apologies for technological problems. I'm clicking here.
Do we know if there's any reports of that variant of COVID that's highly contagious in Iowa? I know there's some reports of it in the Midwest, but I don't know if it's made it to Iowa.
I hadn't received reports specifically on whether or not that is in Iowa. I've not heard from our public health regarding that.
So I do have one question, and mostly because it's a question that we've been getting from the public quite a bit. Given that the metrics don't indicate 100% face-to-face, unless I'm misunderstanding, but that they currently don't indicate 100% face-to-face, can you explain the rationale behind the recommendation?
Sure. As we talked about at great length in our past meetings, we are using the metrics as a guide. And in order to allow our staff to be able to adequately have time to prepare, we need to make that decision as soon as possible to give them the time they need. And so we had decided as a board that I would bring, and my team would bring recommendations when we were feeling like we were in that realm of feeling comfortable making the recommendation. And so that's why the recommendation comes forward at this time. Another thing I think that's really important to consider is a secondary schedule is much, much different than elementary schedules where students stay in cohorts. So in order to have time to redo our master schedules, re-roster students, and get students in the classes they need and that are required, that takes a great deal of time. And so that is why we're here today versus maybe late the week before. We just wouldn't have time to get that turnaround. And we had communicated, we had communicated also on multiple occasions to the public that this change would most likely be recommended at second semester if the numbers would allow for it. And so we feel we've seen enough variation in the numbers with our positivity rate and daily case rate that I think this would be a safe time for us to bring the recommendation forward.
So given the current numbers, do you anticipate, does the trend seem to be going down? I know we're really just barely in that orange for the community metric. Do you have a sense of that, Dr. Arnold, as to where we're heading?
I am so glad you asked Dr. Arnold that, because I was preparing thinking, no, because every time I've sat here and said, I think we're going to see an increase after our Thanksgiving break or after this break, and we don't see that. So I'm glad you asked that of Dr. Arnold.
Well, thanks. I would say it appears, and again, we try to predict with as much as we know and from our background and what we've seen before. And we did not see the big spike that we had been told we would have. We've kind of plateaued and we've been hovering around that mid to upper 30s for about 10 days. There is a likelihood we could go up specifically related to the Iowa State students coming back. I mean, I think that would be, that would not be surprising at all if we're going to have an influx of people coming back and 5,000 of them have been chosen for testing. Of that 5,000, even if 5% are positive, that is going to have an impact on our base rate of our numbers that we see on a daily basis. So that we could see that impact, but it's hard to tell.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I know that there's no crystal ball here, and every time that we have thought for sure we knew what was going to happen, something totally different happens. So it's a hard situation.
Do you have any update on the number of students who are choosing remote versus hybrid?
Yes, we do. Director Mixdorf, do you have that handy to share? Thank you.
I can tell you we've had 270 students request to come into our on-site model since our last opening. So some of them have already transitioned in our elementary transition there, but we've had 270 students.
Can you give the actual percent? I believe the high school is around 40%, but I want to be sure.
Let me look up. We haven't done an update on percent since the board meeting last week, so I can pull those numbers that we've seen from last week, but it'll take me just a minute.
I believe the high school was around 40% and the middle school. Does anybody on my team have that handy?
I have it as of, and we reported this out on social media and to our parents as well, as of January 11. We have it broken down by building. You're right, Superintendent Reisner. The high school is at around 40%, middle school just under 40%. The others vary between 20 and 30%, but across the district, it's right at a third enrolled in remote campus. I can share the exact numbers if it's desired, but that's the snapshot that we reported out as of January 11.
Did you see any increase in requests to go one way or the other in this past week since the deadline was yesterday?
We've seen a higher request to come on site then we have to go into remote. We've had a request of 82 families this month requesting to go into our remote campus that were on site. And like I said, we've had 272 students requesting to come from remote campus back to on site.
Do you happen to know of those 270, a rough estimate for secondary?
The count I did yesterday, we had 103 of that number would have been elementary. So a little over half of that.
Superintendent Reisner, what did you think of the family feedback on the learning model survey that we did at the end of December? And did that figure into your recommendation for this?
Thank you for that question. I think it did, but I would say one of my greatest concerns continues to be the high failure rate that our secondary students are experiencing. I know this is not unique to Ames, but I still believe that we are seeing a failure rate that is just really concerning. Students who are in the secondary grades 9 through 12, when they get behind on credits, down the road, the outcome is not what we would hope for here in Ames. I think we have really high standards and high expectations for our students. And I'm concerned about students who have multiple failures as we go forward. Those are courses that would many times have to be made up. And then that becomes an issue both for the student in being able to take the number of courses they need. And we know the research behind failure rate and how that usually plays out. But the other piece is staffing can become a big issue because you have students who are needing to take multiple classes in the same subject area oftentimes. And so the staffing can be a challenge for that.
Understood. I think globally there's going to be a lot of remediation challenges in education going forward, where I think it's important we remind our students that just because they're failing, they need to remember so is like 90% of the planet right now. So hopefully they don't take that as harshly. And the other question I had is, with this recommendation, how has staff been responding to this recommendation so far?
I think we like we've seen with these decisions in the past, they're very difficult. You have staff who want to return, and you have staff who don't feel comfortable returning. And so that, as we've talked about before, I know that makes these decisions extremely difficult because there are people on both sides advocating for both. I know we often hear that, we often hear one side, but there are teachers, I think, on both sides. And I've had a conversation with a teacher who feels, just doesn't feel like they know how to speak up and be on the opposite side of teachers who are fearful because there's, fear is real. And none of us have a great understanding yet of long-term impacts of learning deficit and also long-term impacts of COVID and as we move forward. So these are just really difficult decisions. I know for the board, it's very difficult, and you listen to our teachers and our staff and our parents.
We did survey the teachers right at the end of December, correct? Do you know approximately what their opinions were split? Because that is something that I think that survey gave people an opportunity to give feedback.
Yes, and I can't remember when that survey, somebody on my team, do you happen to have, It was earlier. I feel like it might have been earlier than December. It may have been toward the end of November. And that survey, I believe you're referring to the one that was administered by the union.
I was referring to the one I think the board saw last week, where it was given to the teachers, I think at the same time
Yep,
that the
Panorama.
learning model one was given to the parents, which if I remember right was around like December 18th, December
Yep, you're
17th,
right.
something like that.
I apologize.
Because it had basically the
Panorama.
same question for staff that we asked parents.
We can pull that up so we can review that if that would be helpful to the whole board. Or
I wasn't necessarily thinking
Okay.
the detailed numbers had to be, but it's kind of a follow-up from the question I asked about how did the family feedback figure into your recommendation. I was kind of wondering how the staff feedback figured into your recommendation.
Sure. As we continue to move forward, we're working hard to try and work with our staff to accommodate. And those challenges become great when we also have the need to have students in school. But I think overall, we felt like we had the information we needed to try and move forward and make accommodations that would help our teachers feel safe.
Superintendent Reisner, Director Beerbaum, you were done. I don't want to, you put mute, so I'm assuming you were done.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So a week ago, we heard the good news that I think you're calling it ESSER 2 funding, I think is what I heard you call it. But a week ago, we heard the good news hot off the press that there was more money coming to our school district and through that. What have you and your staff worked through opportunities to use this funding to address some of these identified challenges that you've brought forth in as you look at full face-to-face for secondary education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. We talked about it, I think, when I reported on that money coming forward just briefly, but a very robust summer school program that would serve all students, not just many times we serve certain grades up, and this, I think there's going to be a need for credit recovery, pretty intensive credit recovery, and we already have a system in place for that. We would just need to expand that, as well as skill deficit. And so being able to be successful in some of those classes is going to probably mean some reteaching, and that would become a part of that as well. So those are really important ways throughout the summer. We have not talked yet about how the money might be used for remediation services while the school day is going on.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Superintendent Reisner, I apologize to interject. I wasn't able to do it quite in a timely way, but I was able to pull up that Panorama survey data if Director Beerbaum is still interested in that, the actual metrics in the survey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't do it just a bit faster. I believe the question that might be most pertinent to your question, Director Beerbaum, reads, how confident are you in your ability, no, that's a parent's ability to support your child's education during distance learning? That 46% of respondents responded favorably to that. Do you think your child should spend less or more time learning in person at school right now? 26% responded favorably to that. How satisfied are you with the way learning is structured at your child's school right now? 36% responded favorably to that.
I think Director Beerbaum was asking for the staff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he was asking.
No problem. I could have been wrong on that, though. You might have asked both.
I think I ended up asking about both, but
I believe you did.
Again, the detailed numbers don't matter. I was more wondering just how that figured into your recommendation, because as you said, you're making this recommendation based on what you're seeing and the information you have. So I just wondered if that figured in.
I have a question. I've been trying to process as we've been talking, and I'm finding myself really confused now. I thought this was going to be an easy vote, but I guess there's no such thing as an easy vote. I guess part of what I'm thinking is, as I said earlier, I was really taken aback by Dr. Arnold's statement that staff would not be required to be vaccinated, and then the follow-up, students would not be required to be vaccinated. And so I guess I'm just sitting here thinking about, what have we been doing then? Like, what have we been doing all this time? Like, we've been trying to keep people safe. We've been trying to do our best. We've been trying to come up with this balance. And what I'm hearing is that we're now going to be sending students back, potentially back to school. Pandemic's still going on. Now there's no social distancing. Nobody's going to have to get vaccinated. What does this look like, not only for the semester, but for next year? Are we then just kind of be relying on our masks and metrics indefinitely? Like that's what I'm not sure why any of this makes any difference if we're never going to create an environment in which people can be safe. That's for anybody who can help me understand.
Oh, okay.
I'm having trouble processing. So it's not just for the superintendent, also for the board, if someone has thoughts.
I believe for the students, there has to be a state statute that says that they have to be vaccinated. I can't speak to the staff side, but I do believe from the student side, until there's a state statute that says so. Also with the students, since they're just now starting trials on those 12 to 17, we don't even know when that will get FDA either EUA or approval. So the student side is harder to speak to because there's so much unknown. As far as staff requirements, I can't speak to that. I will say that of the people that we surveyed from the staff, those who responded, about 90% were interested in receiving it. I can give you the numbers too. We had in the first, for registration, I've had over 400 people register for the vaccine. And I could check on an updated number for that. But so there's definitely interest in it from the staff side.
And Director Benkin, to your point, I was thinking about it too, and I decided to choose from the side of staff wanting to get it. So I think that's what has made me come at peace with, like, kind of maybe waiting for the vaccine, because I just, for what I've seen, for what I've heard, people are wanting to get it. So I guess that if that helps.
But I think your question is a valid question for society in general, Director Benkin, in terms of the vaccine. So unfortunately, we can't solve that here, but it's a valid question.
It is. If it would be okay, Kristen, do you have anything to add to the requirement, I guess, or lack of requirement for staff to have that?
As an employer, if that's something that we chose to do, I would want to check though for sure with legal, just to see if they agree with me. But we could do that, but we would have to provide an exception for those who would have a medical or religious exception to having those vaccines. But as the employer, we do have the ability to require, certain vaccines. My concern with that might be a sort of a, it could backfire a little bit if we start doing something like that with our staff. I think it's good to try. We do have a very, very high interest from our staff in getting those vaccines. And hopefully that will grow as people become more comfortable with the safety of the vaccine.
And for the total number who have registered as of today, 440 have registered an interest in receiving the vaccine. They have up until Thursday to do so.
Out of how many?
We have I believe 800 employees.
700, just over 700.
And it probably is close to, somewhere between 775 or so once you include the food service and bus transportation, as well as our student teachers. So well over half.
And subs.
I was just going to say, and subs.
The biggest concern I've heard is about the lack of social distancing. Is there anything that you can say about that?
We will not have the ability to socially distance at 6 feet. Our classrooms are not big enough to do that. We'll take as many precautions as we can. We'll try to keep class sizes small, but we already know that we have more students coming back than going remote. And so balancing those numbers for students who want to be back in face-to-face, we're going to have to continue to work on that. We will be diligent about hand washing and wearing masks. And we will socially distance to the greatest extent we possibly can.
Can you remind us all what the quarantine rules will be?
I'm going to there we go, Dr. Arnold. Yes.
Yes, it's the things I say in my sleep. So with the new quarantine rules from the CDC, it is someone who has been within 6 feet for more than 15 continuous minutes. They've reduced the amount of quarantine so that if you are asymptomatic, you can get tested day 5 after exposure and possibly come back as early as day 8 after completing 7 days of quarantine. If you choose not to get tested, you can come back after 10 days, or if you have any symptoms at all, it's 14 days. So the time periods are a little different now, but it still continues to be within 6 feet for 15 continuous minutes from an Iowa perspective. IDPH indicates if you are masked, then your quarantine is optional.
Are there any other questions for Superintendent Reisner, Dr. Arnold?
I do have one more question, and it's just general. It's probably for Superintendent Reisner. So I do understand about using the metrics as a guide and not a definitive number. And so what are the other numbers that you will be watching, and when might people kind of get a sense that it might be time to transition? Is hybrid still on the board? Like, just helping us understand, if we all vote yes, what does the future look like in terms of changing mode?
Sure. I think we not only will we continue to look at that daily case rate, but really our staff numbers. And so those staff and student numbers are important. We haven't seen large amount among students, but we want to be really cautious about our staff members and watch those numbers closely and see. We look at them every morning, and we'll continue to do that because that tells us if we have teachers in the classroom. And so those are some of those important pieces. And Dr. Arnold, is there anything else that you feel you'll be watching closely?
I think that leads to what you're saying, is looking at it when we can identify if we have spread within a building. Now we're never going to be able to be 100% positive on that, just because, again, people don't only go to school, they go to other places. So it's hard sometimes to determine spread, but we will be looking at where we have related cases or a case where someone has been a close contact of someone else who was positive. And we do that through our contact tracing. So trying to always keep that in mind as well. And then just looking at those local numbers and any guidance that we have from IDPH.
I think there's a second part of your question there, Director Binken, I was interested in, to Superintendent Reisner, of once this change starts happening, is hybrid then still on the table, or is that
I apologize.
not something that would be considered?
Thank you. Yes, I apologize for that. If we have that as an option from the state, if that is still an option, that would absolutely be how we would move transitioning. Very similar to what we have been doing up to this point, but I know we haven't done it under these newer metrics where we've gone from one model to, well, I guess we did once, but a little different. So that hybrid would still be on the table as long as the state, it's allowable.
and that's at the high school level as well. I thought there was something in our previous discussion about where hybrid, with the new way everybody gets rostered and stuff, would not be as approachable. Did I misremember that?
No, we discussed that. What the high school's working on is a schedule that would allow them to go back into hybrid if necessary, easier than what we had originally thought.
I was reading some of the reports, and Superintendent Reisner, I wondered if you could help me. Some of the reports after the governor's condition, her state of the state. And I keep hearing it said they may require 5 days of school a week. Does the program that or the model that is being suggested by our staff, does it fit that 5 day, or is it that the bill hasn't been written yet, so we don't know?
You're correct.
Have you heard the 5 day piece?
Yep.
And okay, so you've heard that. Okay. Thoughts on that?
Yes, so we would be prepared if that is the direction that the legislature goes, that we would be prepared to go into a 5 day model. We are definitely, that is not the model that was presented, and we would stick with that model unless we were told we couldn't. As far as we still know and believe, we are under an hours requirement. So if we meet that 1080 hours, however we do that with 100% of our students who want to be back face-to-face and not remote, we would meet the state requirement. So there's not been any change to that yet.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I guess I'm struggling to see why we wouldn't wait until our staff got vaccinated, just because we're so close to that. I know February 1st would be the beginning of when it's possible, but I'm really struggling with that.
Yeah, and I understand it'll be very, very difficult for students to transition what would potentially be mid to late March. You're already in a secondary schedule that's very difficult. So you either need to do it at the start of the semester, or you need to have the consistency, because hours and credits are a whole different beast, and how that is looked at by colleges. I don't want any of our students to be not finding themselves in a position where they met the requirement for college entrance. I'm not saying that would happen, because I know we're in a global pandemic, but I also do know those rules and need to make sure that I'm presenting a program that will allow our students to do what they need to do post-secondary.
The only other comment on the vaccine, just to remember, and this is just for everyone's, so you have some immunity 7 days after your first dose. However, we know we're going to be limited and probably going to be rolling out the vaccine. Like, if we had no limitations, I could get everybody vaccinated in 9 days. I figured out I could do it. However, I know I'm not going to have all the vaccine that I want, and I'm speaking myself, but for the district, right? We don't have vaccine at that level because everyone wants it. So we're looking at, weeks and weeks of the first dose until the second dose, and possibly not getting, as far as, people being to that 95% efficacy of the vaccine for at least that first round, 5 to 6 weeks from February 1st, if things go well. So as far as us having accessibility to the vaccine, so that is just another thing to think about as far as the vaccine.
I know, and I've thought about that too. The big hang up for me, though, is the lack of social distancing. That's really a big sticking point for me.
I also think it's probably important to just remember, I mean, schools have been told and continue to be told very aggressively that we need to have 100% of our student, or we need to have the 100% face-to-face option. And so I think our options are going to be limited, and we have to give staff time to prepare. So, there's different ways to look at that. Either we can try and do it on our terms and get our students back in a way that allows for them to have somewhat of a normal semester, or we can wait a little and maybe be forced back and not be as well prepared.
One thought I had as Dr. Arnold was talking, I'm thinking back to what Director Benkin said about, are we ever going to be able to get an environment where everybody feels safe? And one thing we haven't talked about in a while, but we do have some option here, and I'm kind of talking to the board here to whether people would be receptive to this. With that federal money we know is coming in, and I know I was listening to some plans the Biden administration is talking about allowing schools to have rapid testing and things like that. There might be some things we could start seeing if the district wants to look into, like, could we provide teachers with rapid testing if they wanted it, to try to make it so people feel safer in the environment? I know we talked about that before, right, Director Benkin? And the same thing for students even, I'm not trying to say exactly how we can use those resources, but we do know there are those resources available. And I think as a board, what I'd suggest is maybe we could tell staff if there are some creative ways that Dr. Arnold and Superintendent Reisner think that could be used to help to both increase the safety, maybe with additional staff watching at lunch or something so that people can social distance further into more rooms, or maybe through like rapid testing availability to help staff or students that want to get that type of resource and can't afford it normally. I'd be open for any of those because, going back to Director Benkin's question, what is the point? The point is we want to try to create an environment where everybody can feel safe and is safe. And the state's going to do what they're going to do, but we can still do some things beyond that to try to make our environment an extra level of safe, if possible. And I'd suggest we start thinking as a board and as a district what we can do to make that possible. I don't know. That was a long-winded way of asking the board, would we be supportive of that type of thing, like giving staff a little bit of flexibility on what they might want to do to increase the safety factors of some of that funding?
I guess the way I look at this, I appreciated Superintendent Reisner's answer to my question when she talked about using those funds for remediation and really beefing up the summer school. I think when I hear you say, Superintendent Reisner, we need to get these kids back in because they're failing and the increased failing rate and credits, and so I feel like that remediation starts by getting them back in. And so if there are some opportunities that you all believe that you may be able to use those funds to create a safer environment that allows then our kids to get back in the full face-to-face, I would certainly be open to listening to those. And there may be some changes coming ahead in the next days and weeks that may provide us some additional opportunities to create a safer environment for our staff and students. And I would be open to looking at those.
I just wanted to interject really quickly on the testing. It is something we had looked into. This will change, obviously, with the new administration, but currently, even if we wanted to purchase them, it's not something that we can do in the state of Iowa at this moment. Now, let's give it a week, and maybe that is something that we can do, but at this moment, because I've tried a couple different ways to see if we can do that. Some of it has to do with reporting and clear requirements and lots of things to be able to do testing in Iowa. You have to get it test through a covered physician order, and there was not a way currently to do that. But in a week, that might be a possibility.
I have one more clarification, I guess I would just like to ask. So I think I'm in the same place as some of the other board members of feeling very on the fence with this decision and wanting to abide the metrics, but also completely understanding the position of the district in bringing this recommendation. Superintendent Reisner, you mentioned that there's a possibility of students not being able to achieve their credits if we aren't, maybe I misunderstood, if we aren't able to do the 100% face-to-face. Can you just speak a little more to that and what that might look like if we were to look at going into hybrid again down the road?
So a little bit of clarification. So I'm referring to if we were to end the semester at a different date. So not if we were to be in and move to hybrid. And here's the difference in that your hours are different. Okay, so it goes by semester. We would want to, regardless, we would want students to be in a position where they start the semester in their learning model if it's going back face to face, because we have to do an overhaul of the master schedule. And so an overhaul of the master schedule in late March, early April, I don't see that we would be able to meet the hour requirement that we would need to meet for second semester. So because kids have semester classes and they have full year classes. So those semester classes, and I'm wearing my high school principal hat now and thinking I'm not positive how I would get them what they needed, because it would be so imbalanced. Dr. Hawkins, do you have any additional thoughts, having been a high school principal as well? Oh, and I think we may have Dr. Nyberg on here as well. But just
you're essentially talking about how to make sure that we get a Carnegie unit's worth of time and hours in.
Right.
You know, the one thing that's to our advantage is that during hybrid, we do get to count those remote hours towards those hours. There is challenge, obviously. The reason that we had even discussed as a system delaying this recommendation until now was the challenge first semester, right? So in first semester, we had that period of time in which our numbers were really good, and we talked about bringing back our elementary students, and then things changed really quickly. We didn't at that time talk about our secondary students because of the challenge of changing the master schedule mid-semester. I don't believe changing a master schedule mid-semester would be advisable. I do believe with a great amount of work, our administrators can make a master schedule for second semester that will function both for a full 100% face-to-face and hybrid. I do believe that we can make a schedule regardless of that model that will result in students earning credit and getting a Carnegie unit for their classes. Quite honestly, knowing whether or not full-time face-to-face is something that's going to occur at some point during the semester is a really needed component for our secondary schedulers. So you can build a master schedule to begin with 100% face-to-face and then scale it back to hybrid, or you can begin a schedule knowing that you're going to wind up 100% face-to-face. But we could not build a schedule to begin with a hybrid without the idea of 100% face-to-face in our minds and then transition to it. It has to be something that is this foundation of where you begin.
For our system, yeah, it's different. I know people might say, well, what's different here or there? Our system is different. And so the courses we offer and how our system, the staffing we have for the system, it would be very, very, well, I don't know if it's possible, but we would do everything we could to make it possible if that was the desire. So it's a challenge. Secondary is a challenge. I don't know if Dr. Nyberg wanted to say anything to that point either.
I will just echo that it is a challenge, even to be prepared for a 4-day and 5-day model means that the thinking behind how classes are staffed and scheduled takes additional thought and planning and preparation. So every decision we make has a ripple effect on our schedule and how we have students in the classroom. We are trying to build the second semester schedule so that we can be flexible to some degree, but it's an undertaking.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that that it was clear that the schedule would work in that it's possible to do starting in person and moving to hybrid, or starting in hybrid and moving to in person, and students will still get their credits. So thank you.
And I probably could have made that more clear. And again, I don't want to ever say anything is impossible. So I think, whatever we decide, we will make it work. We'll figure it out. These are new times and we've never had to do this way. And so if there's that desire, hear me when I say we're not going to say it's impossible. We'll figure it out, but it'll be difficult.
And we appreciate that. I know that there's no easy solutions here. And there's also still a lot of unknown in front of us when we, as Dr. Arnold said, we don't know when exactly we'll have vaccines. We don't know how many we're going to get. We have the possibility of a new variant that is more contagious, that might spread. We just can't really predict the future. So we just have to do the best we can with what we have. So thank you.
And I want to make sure I follow up with the board on Carnegie unit breakdown. So that what I was talking about, the counting credit and hours. So I want to be really accurate on that. So I will follow up with you I'll do some research on, it's just different. We've never faced these times. So we'll let us problem solve around that too, just so you have an answer, an accurate answer on that.
Yeah, the last thing I would want is for kids to not get their credits like they should. That would be devastating, especially for a senior who doesn't have any time to make it up.
Yeah, we'll make sure. We'll make sure we have that. Right.
I don't really have a question at the moment. I guess what I'm most worried about is that we're taking away one of our mitigation measures, the distancing. So that to me feels like a big step. So it feels premature for this decision at the time for me, because we're taking something that is perhaps what is keeping our community safer. So it feels like I'm not so sure what we're losing will be gaining in return. High school, middle school, and high school, there are more kids are passing through lunches. So I feel there's that risk is greater because we're taking this piece out of it. So I am I'm like my fellow board members. I came in with an open heart, and I heard and I appreciate Dr. Nyber and Principal Michael's work. It is not vain. It has it's not lost on me, all the work you've done preparing for this. But I, as I'm listening and with an open heart and an open mind to all the discussions at this time, I think I will vote no on this one, just because I feel that it's premature and we're taking away one of the mitigation strategies.
The biggest reason, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if there were any other comments or questions.
Well, yeah, the biggest reason I'm on the fence is for personal reasons, and not in the way that you might think. My kids are 100% online. That's not what I'm talking about. My sister is a high school teacher in Missouri, and they've taken all of these mitigation efforts. They wear their masks. They've got face shields for the teachers. They're constantly sanitizing between classes. They're washing their hands, and they have had some really bad outbreaks in that high school. My sister still isn't recovered, and she got sick in November, the middle of November. She's still not recovered fully. And there's a lot of other teachers too, and they can pinpoint it down to a kid that brought it to school because a family member got tested positive for it, and they didn't keep the kid home. I'm not saying that would happen, with our parents or anything, but it's just a concern for me, for our secondary, that somebody will bring it in, and if they're not far enough apart, they're going to get sick, and then our teachers are going to get sick, and we're going to have a lot more problems. So that's really why I'm on the fence. Is I don't want that to happen here. I don't want that to happen to our students or to our teachers.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, it has been moved by Bankin, seconded by Franzen. And I think just for record keeping purposes, I will go ahead and do a roll call vote, and I will go in alphabetical order. Director Bankin?
Aye.
Director Beerbaum?
Aye.
Director Colton?
Nay.
Director Franzen?
Aye.
Director Lankaitis?
Nay.
Director Perez?
Nay.
Director Shields Cook? Nay. Motion fails. All right. That was the last item on our agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Bankin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.